As I crudely try to recreate the upgrades menu that Square Enix said I wasn't allowed to video capture, let me level with you. I'm a huge fan of Marvel games like Insomniac's Spider-Man and the Ultimate Alliances 1 through 3, but I was borderline disinterested going into my early 5-hour hands-on with Marvel's Avengers. That E3 2019 reveal didn't grab me. The idea of assembling some non-cinematic universe heroes just didn't excite me. I had zero plans to suit up into parenthood jeopardizing spandex and buy this game on launch day. But I gotta say, I feel quite differently now though. After flicking the difficulty up to brutal and Hulk smashing my way through this beta, which incidentally is going to be available to you pre-order folks in like a day or so, I had my mind changed by it. A small part of that turnaround, has to come down to the fact that this pandemic has ground the MCU to a halt and I'm just feeling thirsty. But a much larger part of it is that the gameplay here is my kind of origin story. It's like the combat of Insomniac's Spider-Man fell into a vat of Destiny's online co-op, loot-grinding shenanigans. The end result isn't greater than its parts, but this is still a potent mutation indeed. All that being said, allow me to assemble an argument on why this game deserves a second look from you. But first, my usual housekeeping. We don't talk all the time on this channel. In fact, I love to just shut up and let the game speak for itself. So definitely use YouTube's chapter function to zip to sections where I just showcase raw gameplay. Usually I like to deal in just capture of myself playing, but Square Enix has put the kibosh on that. The best they've given me is commentary-free B-roll. That is super frustrating, as I have like 4.5 hours of footage of me just going ham on every mission in the beta on brutal difficulty, plus an extra insane modifier called Challenge 4. It effectively makes enemy power levels plus 10 over whatever you are. Anyway, all that's uploaded as of now and is ready to go in 4K. So watch this space, because it's going to be deploying in like 24 hours. And you know what? I've spoken too much already. Let me just zip it so you can see the game again. Alrighty, so what was the content that I played? It included 4 hero missions, which is like this fancy name for story missions that are very cinematic, very environmentally hemmed in, but they also do include some decent boss fights. After that, there were 3 harm room challenges, which are like wave-based brawls in smaller, graphically less impressive VR arenas that effectively just let you practice and perfect the surprisingly unique strats of every hero you've acquired. For the record, those playable characters are Iron Man, Hulk, Ms. Marvel, and Black Widow. I also got a taste of playing as Cap and Thor, but they were incredibly short-lived moments in the story missions. I'm not going to talk about any of that to prevent spoilers, but what I will say is this: I like where the tale is heading. It's very clear to me that the writers know their stuff with a near comic book guy degree of knowledge, and they also twist things in really interesting ways in this sort of parallel universe. It's also worth mentioning that the new voice actors of these Avengers actually grew on me faster than I thought they would, with a few exceptions here and there. Black Widow sometimes has this sort of inauthentic gruffness, the kind of thing that comes from somebody who's trying to sound tougher than they are. And I love Nolan North in everything he does. But yeah, here, Mr. North seems to be channeling his Deadpool persona in this sort of super wisecracking version of Tony Stark. I mean, none of these things are a huge issue or anything. Perhaps my brain will just accept it after many more hours of play. Let's just chalk it up as something to keep an ear on. Anyway, when you get past an hour and a half of story missions that will need to be sorted before online play even opens up for you, you'll get 4 war zones and 5 drop zone missions. This is the stuff that caused my interest in this game to really take root. They're remarkably replayable chunks of content that feature much more open, multi-objective, sandbox-ish kind of levels. Even better, you can play them with a strike team of 3 players in co-op. Or, if you're mateless and dateless, you can just fill those slots with bots. And if you're wondering how capable said AI is, they're not awful, but they really don't sell what I think the Avengers' greatest attraction is. Meta-humans fusing their powers together in tactically creative, eyeball-melting ways. The AI here is much more about just doing its own thing in a room full of goons and objectives, rather than staying within your orbit to bolster your plans of attack, which in most scenarios consists of one phase: attack. Skill-wise, these cut-rate Jarvises drop into a downed state fairly regularly, but they do also resurrect one another and you just as frequently. Mind you, I did experience 1 or 2 long waits for them as I was groveling on the deck. Sometimes that was due to minor AI pathing issues that sort of trapped my would-be rescuer, and other times, well, they just took a good 15 seconds to get to me because apparently I'm chopped liver. So look, the bottom line is this: if you're going to play this game on any serious difficulty, or you're hanging out to see some true superhero synergy, you'd best come packing a full posse of humans. When it comes to kicking 6 shades of crap out of bad guys, a comparison to Insomniac's Spider-Man can be made, but only in terms of Spidey's terrestrial fisticuffs. No hero I saw in this could match the slickness of his hyper-fast, zero-G, launcher-heavy combos, but the basic concept of fixing knuckle sandwiches is similar. 2-button combos for light and heavy attacks, a dodge button, and a parry system with this really obvious incoming attack warning. And when you do whittle an enemy down, you get a handy prompt to hit dodge plus heavy to execute a beatdown animation that affords you a moment of invincibility and some health back. Complementing that is the option to shoot projectiles, and it's basically a free aim system if you hold in your left trigger. Some heroes are just better at popping caps and yeeting crap than others, and when you're in their boots, you can effectively play this as a third-person shooter, at least until you get swarmed. When it comes to enhancement, the main meat of this beta limits you to 4 characters and only 1 of their respective skill pages can be tinkered with. For the record, everybody has 3 in the final game. So yeah, admittedly, I don't have a full perspective on how fun and effective Iron Man, Black Widow, Ms. Marvel, and Hulk can be. That said, I think I can give you a pretty basic idea of how they roll and if they'll be your thing. Personally, I loved Hulk, but I think that 2005's Hulk Ultimate Destruction ranks as the best playable version of this character that we've ever seen in gaming. Square Enix's version of him is a brawler who is painfully slow to accelerate, but Big Green can get some decent momentum going eventually. His ground pound from mid-air turns people into pikelets, and is actually a better go-to than parrying. His particular intrinsic ability is a rage meter that can be engaged by holding in the right trigger. Do that and you'll buff his violence output and shrug off incoming damage better. I love that his ultra aggressiveness feeds into said meter, but having to constantly hold R2 to be powerful just isn't the best solution. It gives me bad memories of having a controller claw hand while playing the early Assassin's Creed games. Surprisingly, Ms. Marvel was my next favourite, even though I don't usually dig on the character. Her stretchy hand attacks look and feel great. Bitch slapping people with a hand that is 3 times bigger than it should be just doesn't get old. Nor does turning Gigantor to boot fools across the level. Tactically, she's a wonderful sapper against widespread crowds, but she's not so good at interrupting enemies, so you really need to read the room and parry or just relocate when the mob gets too close. The latter can be done with a nifty arm swing that's like a less amazing Spider-Man web sling. Less amazing because you're hamstrung by the need for dedicated grapple points in the world, and they're disappointingly rare. Speaking of swinging about, Black Widow can also do the same with her grapple gun, but once again, her urban acrobatics aren't at Peter Parker levels of fun. Being a nimble minx, she's good for a hit and stun assault, but I used her more to unload lead at a distance, usually on boss weak points from half a postcode away. I honestly thought I'd hate using her, but she actually appealed to my Blade Dancer sensibilities from Destiny. Her worth is in her sneakiness. Going invisible to solve objectives on the sly was pretty damn satisfying. Lastly, we have Iron Man, a flyboy hero who's starkly different to everyone here. He's primarily a projectile character, but to gain the right to use your repulsors, you need to nip in and earn supercharge energy by landing melee damage, which kinda makes for this constant distance yo-yoing. That wouldn't be a problem if his flight controls weren't so iffy. There's a decent learning curve to wrap your helmet around when it comes to transitioning from the ground, airborne hover, and full flight. And even once you've got it down, full flight mode just feels janky in terms of reliably targeting people for a projectile shot. So yeah, I mean, developers, if you're listening, Tones needs a tune. When it comes to performance and visual polish, obviously this is a beta, so you have to go in with your Hulk hand kid gloves on. What I saw was a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde production. The story missions are a heck of a lot more cinematic and exciting, polished and sprinkled with quick-time happy, set-piece moments that have been tuned well and really sell the power fantasy. But like I said, they also seem very hemmed in. You're given almost no latitude for attitude, but I imagine those blinkers will come off as the acts progress, so I'm not too worried. The other half of the equation is the side content of war zones that do get wider playgrounds, but that visual polish takes a hit. It's obvious that these broader fields have sort of been more hastily built for multiplayer. And I don't know, like as a quick example, I'm talking like a staircase of these massive jet-powered floating platforms stuck in the middle of some tundra without any practical real-world purpose other than to just put this one single lockbox out of reach. I mean, it's great that this engine can handle the extra space with no issues, but in terms of vistas, I never saw anything that made me stop, whistle in approval, and then reach for the photo mode. It also has to be said that a lot of the indoor environments for drop zones have a ton of asset reuse. They could have just called them deja vu zones. To be perfectly honest, the eye candy I enjoyed came from the unlockable skins and the clean, crisp, and understandable menu systems that I used to pimp myself up with perks. Now, if you're lazy, you can just hit start every once in a while to lob in, go to the gear section, and simply hold a trigger to tell the game, auto-equip the big number stuff and make me more gooder. And it will, in like 2 seconds. So you can just go right back to super booting henchmen in the genitals, or whatever it is you do to get kicks. And hey, look, obviously, more meticulous players can take their time, mull on the numbers, figure out gear builds that better feed their chosen perk setups, or to shot block enemies who are trying to come at you with a certain elemental damage. Once again, I can't accurately comment on the loot and XP progression here, because the devs basically admit to artificially fast-tracking things in this beta. What I will say is this, it's a shame that all of the gear kleptomania doesn't shape our heroes in any real cosmetic sense. The stuff that I was scooping up was simply inching my percentages up in almost imperceptible ways. So much so, I kinda stopped caring about it. I mean, I was way more interested in filling up my skill points and smashing out set challenges to earn skins. All in all, I mean, it's my opinion that the loot game may dig its claws into me when the stakes get higher and the epic and legendary stuff starts rolling out with actual decent perks. But for now, it's just nowhere near as addictive as it ought to be. I mean, it's been like 24 hours since I played the game and I'm just not feeling that junky itch. You know what, all told, when I disassembled from Avengers, I was pleasantly surprised by what I think we should all kind of realistically expect from a beta. A fun, but still kind of imperfect experience. As I said before, I'm conscious of the fact that it's been a whole year since Spider-Man Far From Home hit cinemas. The time and distance caused by this MCU hiatus has worked wonders in opening me up to the idea of taking on a surrogate, less than star-studded team of superheroes. I do have my concerns, particularly with some level design and environmental detail that's about as up and down as a pile-drive happy Hulk. And it also has to be said, as a true platform agnostic who owns everything and doesn't believe in having favourites, this whole console exclusive characters business is something that makes very little spider sense to me. The webhead is universally beloved, and he really ought to be available to everyone. Hopefully this is a deal that the suits can, I don't know, at the very least dial down to a timed affair. I guess we'll have to wait and see on that one. But looking beyond that, the narrative here has potential, but it isn't setting my beard on fire. What's caught my attention way more is that I legitimately had a blast in the co-op with 3 other mates. Everybody had a role to play, everybody brought something unique to the battlefield. I could dress Hulk up in a wife beater and a pimp hat. Basically, it was a super best friends experience that I doubt will Excelsior up into Game of the Year levels, but I nonetheless look forward to continuing it come September. Anyway, those are my basic thoughts. You're going to be able to play the beta in like 24 hours. Until then, and as always, thanks a bunch for stopping by.